Well, then I guess we'll begin. Hello and welcome to Mush Talks. This is the first of a new podcast series hosted by me, Max, where I try and talk to a number of different people about anything not covered in your daily lives or education. The goal is meant to meet people from all walks of life to share their opinions, beliefs, and knowledge with everyone else in the hopes of educating more on the many aspects of the world we currently live in, as well as promoting healthy discourse, criticism, and debate. My first guest is Steve Judd, astrologer and astronomer. Been studying since 1977 and practicing since 1982, I believe. Thank you for coming on. I just wanted to open up by asking about what your experience of astrology was and astronomy was when you were younger and when you were growing up, and how you kind of saw it before you got into it, because you say that you got into it during your 20s. If you can cast back your mind to what your kind of opinion of it was when you were growing up and where you think that came from.
Before I do that, I do need to make one point. I'm an astrologer, not an astronomer. There is a fundamental difference, and astronomers would love to jump on my head if they said I was an astronomer.
Okay.
Astronomy is the study of the movements of the planets and stars in the sky. And astrology is the study of the effects of those movements.
Sure. So you don't actually study the
I have an amateur interest. I have a telescope.
Sure. Okay.
And I go out and look at them all the time because I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
This takes me back to when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, I used to go out and just look up there and just go, oh, wow, that's wow. And then I noticed, I had a grandfather who was really encouraging me to look at this type of stuff. I noticed there was one or two little lights. This is before the days of satellites. One or two little lights that were moving very slowly over a period of days against the backdrop of the stars. And my granddad said, no, those are planets. That's Venus. That's Mars. I thought, oh, okay. So I was always I wasn't saying I was interested in it, but I was fascinated by it as a kid. But it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I really began to take an interest in it. And there was a defining moment. There was a couple of defining moments that actually grabbed me, if you like. So would you like me to tell you what they were?
Yeah, for sure.
When I left home when I was 15, right? Because you could in them days. And I joined the army. And the army worked out very quickly that I wasn't very good at shooting people or driving tanks. So they ran a lot of intelligence tests on me and found out I was really good with coding and cipher. So they put me into the signals department. And then I had a scrape when I was 19, 20. I got caught with a very long cigarette at Reading Pop Festival back in 1973. So I was out of the army.
Okay.
Right, age 20. Around 22, I picked up an astrological ephemeris. An ephemeris is just like a bus timetable in that it gives the planetary positions for every day of every year. And I looked at it, someone had it lying around. I just looked at it and I saw all these columns of numbers going down and across with symbols on the top. And I thought, oh, there's patterns there. I can see patterns in that. And pattern recognition is one of the basic tenets of astrology.
Yeah. So
from that, I started thinking, well, I wonder what that means. And I just had a loose interest in it. And then around 1981, it was 1980, actually, it was about August 1980. There was one of those revelatory moments where I cast my own horoscope, or my horoscope was cast for me, and I found a way of attributing meaning to those symbols and those patterns, which I went, well, how come this person who's 5,000 miles away, who's a lot older than me and never met me, knows so much about me? And how can I do it? And that's how I actually got into astrology. Sure. That was back in August 19. That's how I really got into it, in August 1980.
So was it that one specific, like once your chart had been kind of written up by this other person that you were that you realized that, oh, this person has definitely never met me, but they can tell all of this about me just from.
It was a very, it wasn't quite that, it was a very similar experience. I read a 4 or 5 page description of a part of my horoscope in a book, and it was so precise, and it was written by someone who at that stage was in their 70s and was a genuine master. And I just thought, how the hell do they do this? I understand the theory behind it, the mathematics, but the philosophy and the other stuff, how the hell do I do that? And can I do it? And then I found out I could. So because to me, astrology is fundamentally different to any other form of divinatory art. It is not an art. It is not a science. It is unique. It is a mixture of mathematics, geometry, symbology, psychology, and pattern recognition. So it's a real mix of the artistry of intuition, pattern recognition. It's got a little bit of the esoteric in it with psychology, and then it's got a strong mathematical and geometric base. So it kind of bridges the gap between the logic rational and the intuitive imaginal.
And do you think that that such complex kind of like aspect of it is what makes it quite difficult for people to kind of get into or understand, and why there's so many I know I've seen in some of your videos you get annoyed about some of the charts that get put up in some newspapers and stuff that are just not and yeah, do you think that's why it's kind of got this kind of, oh well, there's just this and this, and people don't really understand because there is so many aspects, and it is, as you say at one point in one of your videos, I just know I am it. It is me. It flows through me, I think was what you said, which really spoke to me. It was less of a, I think that's how I knew your belief, I think, was because you could feel it within you.
A few things with that. Firstly, sun sign columns are not worth the paper they're written on.
Sure.
Right. I used to write them. I know they're rubbish. Right. Secondly, sun sign newspaper columns and sun sign astrology, as we understand it, did not exist before 1930. It only happened, it started in 1930 because a British newspaper, I'm not going to demean myself by naming it because it's one of the, I don't like it, published an article on the horoscope of Princess Margaret, who had just been born.
Okay.
And the response to that was so strong, they commissioned the first sun sign column, which is then took off. And now you get sun sign columns with your lottery numbers and your lucky crystals and a phone line to pay lots of money, and it's a column. But astrology has been studied for at least 12,000 years, at least. And ever since we've been able to look at the stars and go, what's that? Can we draw meaning from that? And when I say that it flows through me, what happened is that recently, within the last 3 or 4 years, I had one of those revelatory moments where I thought, I'm not buying into all this sort of religious nonsense around guilt and shame and death and heaven and hell, because it's a guilt trip. It's, if you're not a good boy, you go to hell. I'm not doing that. I'm too old for that. So I stopped seeing death as a end of life, and I just started seeing it as a transition of consciousness. So you just change dimensions when you die. When I made that realization, it birthed a lot of other things in me, where I realized that astrology is not actually an inert, objective art or science or whatever it is. It actually has valence and life force in it. So as I say to all my students, people don't find astrology, astrology finds you. A lot of people will just look at the sun signs and go, oh, well, how can this apply to 1 in 12 people? It's rubbish. To which I would go, absolutely right. But those people who actually dig a bit deeper will start finding a degree of meaning and relevance and pertinence to their own individual lives. And the digger you dig, the more meaning you find. So there is a depth to it which goes beyond any type of rational explanation. But at the same time, I don't consider myself as woo-woo or spooky or anything like that. And I decry most people who consider themselves psychic or intuitive, because I think that's probably not true. I don't call myself any of those terms, but I am able to translate the patterns of a horoscope with, because of my experience, pretty good accuracy. And the older you get and the more you practice, the stronger that ability becomes. And that defies any rational, logical perspective. Because an astronomer will say, so you're telling me because Jupiter was there and Mars was there when you were born, but that means this? And I'll say, yeah. And he'll say, or she'll say, prove it. And that's the difference between the scientists and those who have a kind of, not a faith, belief.
Yeah.
Having said that, people often say, do you believe in astrology? And I say, no. Because if you believe in something, then anything outside that belief isn't true. I know astrology. I don't need to believe in it. I know it.
Sure.
I know it works. But I wouldn't try and push that knowledge onto anyone else unless they wanted to. I'm not trying to convert anyone.
Yeah, for sure.
And the fact is that unlike any other form of esoteric, mystical, divinatory art, astrology's been around since the dawn of history.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things when recently when I've started to question everything that I've been told in my life. I did have a look at, or that came to my mind when I was thinking about it. I was personally very critical, having only seen kind of those sun sign charts in newspapers and stuff, and being like, well, all of them kind of relate to me. This could be, and that if that's the only thing that you're given, I think it kind of fosters that that approach in a lot of people. But then thinking about it and being like, well, there's kind of evidence that people have been doing this for thousands of years, and only kind of stopping that within the last 200. Like, it doesn't make sense why they would have carried it on generationally, I think, which is where my kind of intrigue comes in. You talk about that coming up in the sun signs in kind of like 1930.
Yeah.
Do you think that a lot of that leads people down the path of not believing in it? And how do you think that kind of affects people? Do you think it's a conscious choice to kind of, in a way, to steer people away from astrology? Or do you think it's just like people are just like, oh, we can quickly make some money by telling people that they're gonna have lots of fortune this month, or whatever?
Certainly the latter.
Yeah.
Certainly the latter. But at the same time, astrology has outlasted every culture and every religion. It's older than them all. And it is a threat to vested interest groups who want people to behave in certain ways, to believe certain things, to practice certain doctrines or theologies or practices. And astrology encourages people to think for themselves and to encourage their own self-growth and self-development, which is a threat certainly to most religions, the possible exception of Buddhism. Yeah, it's not very good for the large corporates either, who want people to work in their factories on a regular routine and not think about the deeper things in life, just make money. So yeah, there's an element of this. But do I think it's deliberate? No, because I don't go down the conspiracy route. I used to be a real conspiracy theorist. I used to be paranoid, and I see conspiracies everywhere. And now I realize that they're just not that intelligent.
Yeah.
That's just, it's silly to go down that route, because there's so many people out there who think, oh, it's all a plot, which is just their own latent paranoia, basically. The powers that be just aren't that intelligent to organize that massive, if you like. They can do little conspiracies, yes, but can't do the big ones. They're just not. The secrets will come out. Nobody can't keep secrets that long.
For sure. you spoke about religions, and you're not a fan of a lot of them, but you did mention Buddhism there. Is that
Yes,
kind of one that you um not relate to, or is it just one that you see as more kind of in line, I guess, with
as I
how you
understand it,
mm,
the principle of Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism, but most forms of Buddhism, the central core is know thyself.
hmm
Whereas most other religions go, you will believe in what I tell you.
hmm
And if you don't, you'll go to hell.
hmm
Whereas, or heaven or whatever. Whereas
hmm
Buddhism says, no, know thyself first and foremost. And I've gone on record a number of times as saying that if astrology was taught in schools within 2 generations, we'd see an end to warfare and an end to most violence. Because people would know themselves.
mm,
They'd know the capacities, they'd know what they were specialized in, they'd know what to avoid and what types of people to avoid. And they'd gravitate towards specific situations where they could maximize their skills, become much more successful, much happier in themselves,
mm,
tune in with like-minded people, and we'd have a real sense of community. But community is not on the agenda of the governments, the corporations, the religions. They like the idea of having a segmented world with borders and passports and different languages and people seeing each other as countries as not the enemy, but different.
mm.
And I think the days of nation states are rapidly coming to an end. I just hope it doesn't diversify into large corporate states, for
hmm
example, which is an option,
hmm
unfortunately.
Yeah. Do you think that with more knowledge on astrology, it would ever, as humans may have a habit to do, be used in a kind of like weaponized almost? I mean, if you understood someone else's astrology, could you not then use that personally to be like, oh, well, they're going to be particularly weak on this day. I could try and do the X, Y, and Z, and
That's a really, really intelligent question, Max. Unfortunately, I have met just one or two people over the last 40 years who have abused and misused astrology. But these people generally don't last long. They normally find that something happens to them which takes them out of the game, or
is it
they
all
crack
be?
because they realize that they're not doing what astrology is meant for. And something happens to them at the mental or the psychological level, which burns them out.
hmm
Um, I very recently did another interview with someone about AI and astrology.
hmm
And all the other astrologers are going, oh no, AI, evil, evil, evil. And I'm thinking, don't shut the door after the horse has bolted. It's here.
Mm,
We're not going to get rid of it. We might as well use it. AI is now writing a lot of astrology programs.
okay.
AI is now writing a lot of astrology sun sign columns. AI cannot synthesize the way I can.
hmm
It can draw meaning from a number of different patterns and put it all down on paper or even speak it.
mm,
But it can't synthesize it, intermingle it, mix it up, and draw a depth meaning of which is the strongest thing and which is the weakest thing. That's something that only an astrologer can do. And I can't see AI ever really replacing astrologers, unlike most other forms of intellectual teaching, which I do think AI could eventually
hmm
replace.
Because you feel like it comes through. You said it's like a life force almost.
Yes, is
To come through. So the AI would struggle to, yeah, connect
yeah, yeah.
with
See, whilst I don't do religion
mm,
and I don't do God,
mm,
I do have a good relationship with the divine.
hmm
However, when I say to people, like, you've got to work on your relationship with the divine, however you see the divine as being.
hmm
There's no rules about what you should or shouldn't believe. It's up to you. I have a great relationship with spirit. I call it everybody, other people call it God or Buddha or Allah or the universe.
hmm
I call it the upstairs department. Call it what you like.
mm,
But I've got a good relationship with spirit and it doesn't talk to me. I don't talk to it. But sometimes I can just, when I'm looking at a chart and I see the patterns and I'm stuck and I don't know what to say, I just look at the patterns, focus on the pattern, and then I just go, right, I've got the feel of that, open my mouth. The words come out.
Just let it.
And it, of course, it's me, but it's a bit more than me as well. And I don't know what that other part is. And I hope I never find out, but I trust it implicitly.
Yeah, it must be a weird feeling. Was that difficult kind of getting work or telling people, I guess, as you're going through life? Oh yeah, this is what I do. If you're at a party briefly and suddenly they're like, oh, what do you do? And then suddenly you're like, oh, I read people's charts and all of this, and then people go, oh, okay. Or how has that come across as you?
So for the first 30 years, it was like, you don't believe in that rubbish, do you? And then it was like, and then they started thinking, oh, he's making money. It must be good. And then it's like, oh, how does that work then? And then, oh, I don't believe in that. Fine. And some people, like when I'm dealing with people who are just closed down to that type of thing, they say, well, what do you do for a living? I say, oh, I'm an online internet consultant.
Okay.
I work with people's consciousness. I work with people's psychology. I'm a form of counselor online. That's what I say, and I don't use the word astrology. If they press me, I can sometimes say things like, "Well, I'm a cosmological consultant. I work with stellar patterns." Like, oh, you're an astronomer? I said, sort of. But most people, I just say, no, I'm an astrologer. And if they look at me and I think, okay, fine, get over yourself. I'm too old and too long in the tooth to care what anyone else thinks now.
Well, once you've got this knowing, I guess, within you, then it doesn't really, I guess it can't really bother you when people don't. You're just like, okay, well, I'll carry on doing me and following what I should be.
And the beautiful thing is, I'm not preaching it to anyone else. I'm not trying to convert anyone else. My clients come back regularly because they know I get results. And when I put stuff out on YouTube, I'm not trying to convert the world. I'm just putting it out there because it's my passion, and I love it. And I want the world to learn astrology, yes, but it's I'm not trying to preach it, and I'm certainly not trying to convert anyone, because that way lies danger. Otherwise, you become a cult leader or something, and that's pretty nasty. So,
steering clear of that one.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else that you think that you talk about how you think astrology should be put into, should be taught in schools, and this would help a lot of people and should be accepted into society? Is there anything else that you think should be that you think is missing, or do you think once astrology comes in, it will just help people navigate their lives and that will be enough?
I used to think just astrology, but in the last 20 years or so, I've realized that astrology is one side of the coin, and on the other side, you've got psychology. And one of the greatest psychologists of all time was also an extremely talented astrologer. That was Carl Jung. And he's the founder of modern psychology, basically. So psychology and astrology are twins. And if psychology were taught, I mean, you can do degrees in psychology, but I think psychology should also be taught in upper school, 13, 14 onwards. And astrology is now being taught in some schools.
Okay.
I'm aware of astrology is not taught in schools in this country, but I'm aware of schools in America, Canada, New Zealand, Costa Rica, where astrology is taught in Montessori schools and Steiner schools. And it's only basic astrology, but it's a start. So yeah, hopefully this is the start of something new.
Yeah. You've also done some videos, or one of the videos I saw recently was about the coronation.
Yes.
And you talked about the potentially not so favorable aspects of King Charles and his coronation. And you also talked about him having people to read his charts, and you suspected that you knew who these people were. I'm not going to ask you who they are, but how common do you think that is amongst more elite members of society? Obviously, the royal family is very steeped in tradition, so them having astrologers from thousands of years ago is probably pretty common to then continue on, and maybe not so in the more business world or prime ministers, but how many do you think there is more than is kind of shown? Because obviously I'd never seen anything of, oh yeah, the Queen's got her astrologer.
I know this to be true.
Right.
In the British royal family, with the exception of the Hanoverians from about 1760 to 1840, with that exception, there's always been an astrologer in the royal court of Britain since about, or at least 750 AD, at least. There's documented evidence of this. But look, there is an astrologer royal today, but it's a puppet figure and he's a joke. So I'm not going to demean astrology by naming him. I cannot put my hand on my heart and say to you that the current members of the British royal family have astrological advice coming to them regularly. I do know that elements of the British royal family have consulted astrologers and still do. It's not me. And this is common in other royal families throughout Europe as well. And obviously in places like Southeast Asia, India, Vietnam, Burma. This is common there. It's routine. It's also common, not so common, but accepted in certain elements of business. I think it was J.P. Morgan who said that millionaires don't consult astrologers, billionaires do. There are certain financial astrologers out there who work exclusively with the stock market for clients. To me, this isn't that ethical. It's about making money using astrology, profiting at other people's expense by using astrology. So to me, that's not really that ethical. I could not let myself do that, but it is done. And I don't have a problem with people using astrology to improve their work situation. I give clients advice all the time on when to start a business, when to launch a promotional campaign, stuff like that. Yeah, they pay me to do that. But with the big bucks, I draw the line at sort of stock market or gambling, or it's the astrology of gambling. There's the astrology of sports betting. I mean, to me, this is tacky. But maybe I'm a purist.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But it sounds like yeah, there are definitely dangers. But I suppose if you have more people knowing about it and it's taught more in schools, that will maybe protect people. I don't know whether that would.
I believe so, but this important distinction needs to be made here. I don't do words like fate, destiny, or predetermination. I do free will, choice, and self-determination. There's one of the oldest sayings in astrology that goes back thousands of years is the planets impel, they don't compel. They don't make you do anything. You have free will, you have choice. But if you do things according to your horoscope at the right time, then you get much better results than if you do them at other times. So it's a help, but it's not ruling your life. And if it did, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, but I know in some of your videos you talk about this is for instance, there's a certain time and this is a place where you will be volatile and get your buttons pushed, but then you might spin this round as well and be like, although if you take time and think things through, this can then be very beneficial for you.
Yes.
That's kind of an example of what you're talking about. Like it's
yes.
there. impelling you to be irrational and in this way, but if you actually take your free will and mold it in a specific way, this can actually be beneficial for you in the long run.
Yes.
Do you think that if you're you're not in the religious sense of like you must be good and then go to heaven, or if you're bad you go to hell, are you more of a balance on the whole good and evil aspect? And does that come into your astrology of being like, well, if I know what's coming up, for example, I can avoid the bad, and is that always the good option, or do you sometimes tell people to sink into that bad because you know that it's I don't know, is that a consideration of how
It is for me. And when I'm teaching my students, I do impress upon them that in order for them to become a good astrologer and to gain the respect of their clients, their friends, their family, the people whom they work with, certain words like dignity, integrity, conscience, and particularly authenticity are really important. And if you want to be authentic, then you're not going to let yourself have a bad conscience. You're going to want to be a good guy. You're going to want to be a good person.
for sure,
Because how can you be authentic if you're a nasty manipulator?
for sure.
So at the end of the day, it's up to everyone, you know. But astrology there's something about astrology that raises one's inner vibration, and you try to become a better person by practicing astrology. It's a side effect, but it happens. So, and then if you find yourself thinking, well, not thinking, because what goes on up here is private, but if you find yourself behaving in the outside world in ways that are not very good, then you tend to lose that altruistic energy which supports astrology, and you find that you just can't do it anymore, or it just doesn't work for you anymore. So there is a kind of unspoken force here, a background energy, if you like, that says, no, if you want to do this, you've got to be clean inside yourself as best as you can. You're not being asked to be successful, you're not being asked to be perfect, you're being asked to do your best. That's all. And there's no one else can tell you what your best is either. It's only you.
Or maybe an astrologer, who knows where
I would never tell anyone that they're not doing well enough. I would just say, just do your best. That's all.
For sure, for sure.
Doesn't matter if you fail, just do your best.
Yeah.
Crazy thing is, it's got to the point where just as I'm beginning to really become more visible, more public, and teaching more and more, I'm beginning to have to turn clients away because my books are full and I've got a long waiting list. And for a long years and years, I've been struggling to pay the bills. And now all of a sudden all of a sudden in the last 5 to 10 years, it's just turned around. And now I'm having to farm new clients out to my students because I just don't have the time for it.
Yeah.
So I'm getting more and more into teaching and writing, but then I'm nearly 70. So, you know.
Do you think that that's because you've just had such a kind of long career at this point and you're so well established and you've kind of like built that trust and that recognition among people? Or do you think that more people these days are coming over to astrology and kind of looking at it in more favorable and kind of like understanding eyes?
Definitely both.
Okay.
More and more people are opening up to astrology, but more and more people who have been open to it are developing their own sense of it and want more depth. When I started teaching just at the start of lockdown, the first course had about 30 students. Now I'm dealing with anywhere from 100 to 200 at a time on Zoom. Zoom and COVID happened at exactly the same time, basically. So yeah, and I wouldn't say I'm in control of my own life with this stuff. I'm just flowing with it. Things happen. I think, oh, that's interesting. Let's do that. And I flow with it. And somehow it works.
It works out. It's a very kind of Buddhist, that's a kind of Buddhist way as well, isn't it? Just kind of like going with the
It is.
flow of life in a
It
way.
is. But I've changed that one around. It's going with the flow, which is just a bit too easy. You know, you're just hitching a ride on the wave. All right. Okay. I call it flowing with the go.
Okay.
That's a bit more of a conscious association. Okay.
You've still
I'm
got that
doing
free
this.
will of
Yeah.
I'm pushing the boat here, but
Yeah. Yeah.
there's something that's guiding me down here, and I'm gonna
Exactly.
steer into it.
I shall use that one later. Thank you for that. Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm going with the go.
And what do you think is part of the reason why more people are coming to this kind of open-mindedness about astrology? Do you think there's anything in particular that's
I do. I
brought that
really do.
about?
Because church attendances are down 80% on where they were 40 years ago. People have got bored with old men in skirts telling them what they should believe. They've got bored with paedophile priests. And the 200 years ago, even 120 years ago, we needed the priests, we needed the churches, because we were all working in the fields. And then on the seventh day, we rested, and then we went to church so the priest could look after our spirituality for us before we went back to work in the fields again. Fine. Nowadays, that doesn't work like that. We've all got our own relationship with the divine. More and more people are developing their own ideas and philosophies around spirituality and what works for them. And they're getting their own religion. And I'm a big fan of etymology. I study the root of words. Religare, religion, religare. It means, it's from a Latin, it means to bind down, to tie.
Interesting.
And it comes from the root word liga, ligament, to bind bone to sinew or tendon. So this is a binding thing with religion. And I don't want to come across as anti-religious, because religion's been a big help to billions of people for much of their lives. And if it brings some kind of spiritual comfort, great. But astrology is a massive upgrade on conventional religion, because conventional religion tells you what to believe. Astrology says, open your mind.
And wouldn't class it as a religion, although I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think when I was younger, I definitely saw it in that way, being like non-religious in any way for a large part of my life. I saw all of them as this belief and this faith, and that's what people held on to. The more I've seen into astrology and the complexities of everything that you're doing and the patterns, I've seen the book that you have of all of the bus timetables that you pulled up in one of your videos, and all of these things, and I think the more I look at people who have had careers like yours that are spanned for 40 years, and you're still like, no, this is I wouldn't be doing this for this long if I thought I was just absolutely chatting shit for to everyone. But no, so you wouldn't class it as a religion. You would class it as
no. I would class it as a system of self-empowerment through developing one's own personal belief systems and philosophies on life, and helping oneself develop better and better personal practices in life. It is not a belief. It is not a religion. It is not a science or an art. It is a unique standalone system of pattern recognition and the ability to act and react to certain non-personal phenomena coming from elsewhere to influence one's life for the better. I can prove how astrology works, not in a way that scientists would accept, but you can hear Jupiter on the shortwave on the radio. It's well documented how the moon affects various plant and animal life. If the radio waves from Jupiter can be picked up on a shortwave radio, then those radio waves are hitting us.
Yeah.
There must be an effect.
Yeah.
It's a stretch to say that that effect is then what influences Jupiter in the horoscope. But to me, well, I don't need proof.
Mm.
I know it works. And so do most of the people I work with.
Mm.
And to actually step outside of the need for external proof, relying instead on one's own personal experience, is a massive step forward for a lot of people. Because so many people are comfortable with being told what to believe, what to think, what to practice. But for them to actually think for themselves and believe what they know to be true from their own experiences is a radical break with the past.
Have you seen it have any kind of drastic changes? Have people been suffering with maybe particular, I don't know if it has happened in your experience, but potentially with certain mental health conditions, and I can imagine that if you do give someone that kind of self-empowerment, it can bring them above potentially states that they're in. I don't know if that's been an experience that you've had with any of your clients. Yeah.
Yes, unequivocally.
So in a way, you are also a therapist of some extent, or more of a divine.
I really balk at the idea of being a healer. I prefer instead the word catalyst.
Okay.
I help people change their minds.
Okay.
Okay. Now, when you say change your mind, that sounds easy. But when you actually think about that phrase, I help people to change their mind, to change not what they think, but what they think with. So it's like a hardware upgrade, not a software. It's the operating system. Sure. For many people, they're running on Windows 3, and I help them upgrade to the latest Mac. Nice. Right? So yeah, mental health, psychological health, emotional health, sometimes physical health. There's certain things like today, for example, later today, if the internet holds out, I'm teaching about 50 to 60 students the astrology of health, because I've got books going back 200-300 years, and I've got 40,000 charts at my disposal, and I can see how certain patterns in the chart are more likely than average to denote certain health issues or certain dietary issues. And by pointing these out, people can then take preventative measures to A, stop them getting ill, and B, to maximize their health. So yeah, health and astrology. There's a wonder. All your grandmother and your great grandmother, they would all have had a copy of Culpeper's Herbal on the mantelpiece from the 1600s. Nicholas Culpeper, the greatest herbalist of all time. He died in his late 30s, but he wrote so many books on herbalism, and he was also a brilliant astrologer. And he likened all the herbs to a particular planet or sign of a zodiac, when to pick them, when to prepare them, when to use them. And people swear by Culpeper's Herbal to this day. He also translated all the medical texts from the College of Surgeons into English, and he was the first person to do that. And the College of Surgeons, who were speaking in Latin, they took out a contract on his life because he gave people the power over their own body. First time that happened, that's about 1630, 1640, just before the Civil War.
Yeah. It's crazy. That's amazing, just the kind of extent of it just kind of covers into all aspects of life, I guess.
In the Civil War, both sides had astrologers riding up and down the lines of the army before a battle, shouting out predictions, saying, "We're going to win. The planets say so." You know, it was bullshit.
Just to kind of boost the mental.
Yeah. But it's always been there in the background. And it always, as long as people can look to the stars and search for meaning in the patterns that they see, astrology will always be there. People say to me, when did astrology start? The earliest written records go back to Sumeria around 4,800 BC, because that's the first bits of pottery we know where we see priests pointing at the stars when they're crowning the king. This is before language. But I think that astrology started about 1 billion years ago on the plains of Kenyan plains, when a hominid got off its knuckles and stood up and went, "Oh wow, look at that! Oh, that's moving. Oh, what does that mean?"
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's been around forever. We've always looked for meaning.
Mm.
This is what separates humanity from any other species on this planet.
Mm.
To quote Terence McKenna, human history represents such a radical break to the systems of biological organization that preceded it, that we must be some type of response to some type of magnet or attractor in the future that's pulling us forward.
Mm.
There is a point to evolution. And I think we're almost at that point of transcendence, where we're going to see what our ancestors have been dreaming about, sat around their campfires for the last 10,000 years.
Mm.
Of course, every generation thinks we're living in the golden time. You know, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, we were going, "Oh, look, televisions." And then 30 years ago, "Oh, what's this new email thing?"
Yeah.
And now it's like downloads and artificial intelligence. What's it going to be in 10 years' time?
Yeah.
It's accelerating.
Mm.
And the acceleration of technology, the acceleration of population, and the acceleration of spirituality are all keeping pace with each other.
Mm.
So eventually that graph is going to stop curving up. It's going to hit prime vertical. And when that happens, we either break down or break through. And I kind of think that's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years.
That sounds very exciting.
Scary, but exciting.
Scary, but exciting for
yeah,
sure. Very,
absolutely.
very. Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for talking. If you have any recommendations of for people that maybe want to get into astrology, would you recommend any books, or just come to your course? You can
There is a particular book. I'm not going to start my next course now till 2025.
Okay.
My courses will be available on my different websites. My websites, stevejudd.co and astrobabbleproductions.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's where all my teaching stuff is. There is a book. It is the best teach yourself astrology book on the market. It's new. I say new. It's about 10 years old. It's by a good friend of mine who's unfortunately no longer around. It's called Astrology Decoded by Sue Fairbrother, F-A-R-E brother. It's the best teach yourself astrology book on the market. It's simple, clear, easy to understand.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And thank you again for taking this time to come and talk to me about what your life and what you do. It's been very interesting.
I've enjoyed this far more than I thought I would. I hope this podcast series of yours really works out well.
Thank you. That means a lot.
All right, Max. Good luck.
Thank you.